I decided to make this a log of like journal entries, or just read from my journal entries and conversation topics that I come up with from time to time. Yeah, I think that would work. I mean, you gotta start somewhere. All right. Well, I guess here we go. As of this moment, I am an individual with the capacity to act, and I feel I am called to action from the part of me that feels from within what is good, honorable, and just. It is understood that we as a people are creatures of thought first. Every other subject, every other discipline, and manifestation of action follows thought. We must know how to act. Knowing is the source of human agency and freedom. And freedom is every man's and woman's God given right. It is non negotiable. Me personally, I believe it is one thing to beat a man, one thing to rob him, but it is a cardinal sin to rob him of his spirit, to strip him of his dignity and the solidarity of his own mind. That is the only thing we can ever truly claim to be our own, even in our darkest days and loneliest nights. That being said, I feel called to act to inform young men and women like myself, and maybe even elderly if you're watching this, how we have been robbed of our freedom. The national body is mistaken if you think you can rebuke man and woman's instinct for divine alignment, for submission to an ideal form that the man and woman embody, right? Could embody, given the demands of the social contract, which is downstream of environmental pressures and therefore selection pressures, right? That is what we consider God of the political body, and the source of spiritual vitality. By rejecting hierarchy and meritocracy in the image of the ideal man and woman, under the guise of egalitarian ideals and equity, that is how the spirit of the West has died. America was never built upon the law of man, but his form at the apex of his becoming. First and foremost, I believe America was originally an honor culture. The American man was never granted freedom to do what he wanted, but freedom to do what he knew he should. Freedom was never the absence of constraint. It was the presence of inner law. The call to do not what one wants, but what one knows one must. Because we have rejected God, which we have established as the ideal form, just different grammar or symbolism, whatever you want to call it, different syntax, we have sought it in the politician, the man who is subject to no one, not even himself. The corrupt man, the charlatan, has served the function of the divine alignment, and we, as a consequence, have worshipped the two greatest of evils, and in my opinion, the only true evils in this world: sloth and envy. The only axis of evil one needs, or of judgment or morality, that one needs is that which sustains and that which does not sustain. Now, here's where things get a little bit wonky and a bit, I guess, woo-woo, metaphysical, I guess. Temporal awareness, the ability to see through time, is temporal awareness is man's bridge to the ideal form. The source of honor and goodness and virtue and integrity all stem from temporal awareness. The ability to see through time so you can know that which will benefit you and that which will not benefit you in relation to your current context and the previous context. You can go, oh, this is good for us and this is bad for us. Alright? You have been lied to. You have been told comfort is the ideal form of the man and woman. But you must understand, none of this came about from comfort. The path of least resistance, nature, is not something for we as men and women to submit to as an agent of, well, God. It is nature that is to submit to him. Man, humans have never been adapted to our environment. Never. The weakest, the slowest, the most fertile, and yet the most cunning. And we as a people can conquer the earth, world beyond worlds, and realm beyond realms, so long as we hold on to the sight that makes us in the image of God. Our foresight. It is the axis of good and evil because man lives or dies by his foresight. And it is the will of every organism, be it a virus, an insect, a nation, a man, to will itself to life, something to be fought for. It is a miracle. It is the lightning in a bottle that is spurned by seemingly nature, because everything just wants to kill us, right? You fall, you die, you get sick, you die, right? Oh, you stepped wrong, you twisted your ankle, now you can't walk, you're dead. So, yeah. Circling back, the American man and woman are entitled to the freedom to do what one must. Only know what must be done so long as they know what will come. Foresight births duty, duty births freedom. Without foresight, there is no clarity. Without clarity, there is no command. And without command, there is no man, only reaction. And man has no power in reaction, in the likeness of a beast, because man is only so free so much as he is powerful. Let it be known that all that is modern man's culture, in inclination and in spirit and in practice, has undermined his faculty for foresight at every turn through dopamine loops, social media, attention, just chipping away at his attention span, right? It is adverse to man. It is a culture of Satan. Journal entry 2. Upon reflecting on my previous notes, I have decided to write another entry. It's like a dialogue between like the different thoughts themselves. Like each thought is like a person, right? So before we establish that man was only as powerful so much as he knows, because and that's where we derive our freedom and our power, right? Because when you have freedom, you have the capacity to act, the capacity to do, even when others wish that you couldn't, right? You are not constrained. You're not beholden to whims or incentives or prerogatives other than your own. It's an interesting dynamic because as humans we're inherently social creatures, and that's where we derive our power. So we are only free when we are beholden to each other in this weird way. But that's a conversation for another day. In response to the previous journal entry, here I wrote, and that brings us to Christianity. Christianity, and this is inspired by Nietzsche. It's Nietzsche adjacent, but I think this is the truth he was trying to distill in some of his writings, on his critique on slave morality. Alright. When he wrote about slave morality, exactly. Alright, here we go. What you must understand is that the Christians who spurn truth, which will always be in the image of divine law, they reject it. Knowledge, the path to truth, they call it evil. They call it the devil. Failing to recognize that ignorance is the greatest cruelty to ever walk this earth and worlds beyond. This is why they burn in Salim a middle-aged woman over a 13-year-old girl without due trial because she used her imagination, a divine tool, to talk to a doll while playing. They fear truth because it reflects on their souls, which become contemptible, and it remains contemptible so long as they hide their hearts in darkness from the fires of enlightenment, which are only felt through toil of the earth and one's own mind. Slave morality, which will be referred to as Christianity, has a strange relationship with or the Abrahamic religions in general. Slave morality, which we will refer to as Christianity, has a strange relationship on effect on its subjects.
I believe in psychology there is a term, there's like object-object relations, subject-subject relations, and subject-object relationships, right? The subject is animate, the object is inanimate. Christianity teaches the subject to despise the subject. And unlike a lot of other ethical frameworks, which are inherently self-actualizing through inner alignment, Christianity enforces homogeneity by its very nature because it infers what is good for itself from what it despises in others. And since humans are tribal creatures, this almost always boils down to they wear blue versus I wear red. It depends on the psychological and social lynching to infer its morality of others, which has more to do with identity and truth. And all organisms at a certain level of consciousness need a sense of identity to orient themselves, which is necessary for survival. You can see how this can get bad really quick. The West is blind. They failed to realize that in separating themselves from evil, denying it in themselves, they had created an equal measure to the very goodness they have sought. Every action has its counterbalance. Nothing in this world is divorced from its polarity. We as humans are born with inherent fixations, which focus by its very nature makes us see one thing, but blind to another. Ignorance, and this births ignorance. You can never escape it, and yet it is the source of suffering and cruelty. Throughout our lives, we subject ourselves and others to the same cruelty again and again, and to ourselves by virtue of our own ignorance. If you were not blind, you would not see, and if you could not see, you would not be blind. Knowledge, by its very nature, requires confinement and parameters, and the self is realized through knowledge and contrast. But Christianity demonizes the suffering brought upon by knowledge. They call it devil, and there is a valid reason for this, but I guess it's not unfounded, but I don't believe it to be valid. They call it evil, and in doing so, separate themselves from the path to wisdom, the valuing and pursuit of knowledge and understanding, and have cut off our path, or their path, to divinity, and call it piety. The devil, as they call it, this trickster, even the archetype of truth, which is just, the devil is just the archetype of truth exposed through inversion. It is nothing more than a human inclination for dialectic reasoning, which is, I think this, you think the opposite, and it folds in on itself and it collapses, and you have an inference of what is true based on the opposing viewpoints, right? It only haunts one so much so long as they refuse to face themselves. And as far as I understand, Christianity rejects the self entirely as an agent within this world. And the journal entry too. The reason why this journal entry is important or relevant to the previous one is because in the previous one it was established that knowledge is how we realize our freedom. And I wanted to say this because it is the dialectic, or the dialogue with the self, is the first part, the self-awareness, the first inkling of contrast between yourself and your relation with others and the world. To go, I am me, that is that. Well, why am I like this? Why are you like that? Right? And this is the first step to all other forms of knowledge, even when you're a child, right? It's just that I feel that we tend to neglect it as we age. And so I don't think people really progress past high school, if I'm being honest. And I guess you could say, oh, I guess you could pull out your epistemologies and your empiricism, your rationalism, right? But at the end of the day, right, the epistemology that really has the final say is the subjective, ironically. But the thing is that it always has to answer to the subjective, because you is foundational, because you as an individual agent are really the only thing that will truly ever persist across situations from situation as the axis of reference. And so it is the epistemology, the frame of reference that all other frame of references have to answer to, regardless of how rigorous your experiment it actually is, or a logic exercise actually is, because you cannot remove the observer from the experiment, right? And so I find it asinine or wild how we can reject that faculty entirely and call it rigor, right? But that's the conversation for a different day.